All right, good morning. Let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining. I know you guys are all taking time out of your busy day. As part of the Ahead webinar series, today's topic is how public cloud is advancing digital transformation in healthcare. Just to kind of give you guys a little bit of background on how this topic came about, I would say over the past 12 to 18 months, we've been seeing a common set of use cases, or public cloud use cases, proliferating throughout the healthcare industry. And with that public cloud adoption comes its own set of challenges. As we consult with our healthcare clients, we put together a set of lessons learned around public cloud adoption, specifically around public cloud adoption in the healthcare industry. But before we jump into it, I do want to talk about my background. My name is Andy Sajus. I am a senior client solutions architect here at Ahead. I've been in this role for roughly 4 years now, servicing some of the larger healthcare systems in Illinois. I'd say 80 to 85% of my day is attributed to solving complex IT challenges with those said healthcare systems. And to kind of give you guys a high-level overview of the topics I want to cover today is first, digital transformation in healthcare. What does that exactly mean? The digital transformation has been somewhat of a trendy phrase throughout the industry for the past couple of years. There is some relevancy as pertains to healthcare, and I do want to talk about it. And then the public cloud use cases. As I said, there's been a common set of use cases that we see that are kind of catching on within the healthcare industry. And then lessons learned, right? So anytime you talk about public cloud and patient data or PHI data into public cloud, I think security is probably the number one conversation, or HIPAA compliance is the number one conversation that comes top of mind. I do want to address that. The enterprise skills gap, right? So this is not just isolated to the healthcare vertical, but I would say this is something that's an issue throughout the IT industry as a whole, as it pertains to cloud engineers and DevOps engineers kind of being a short supply, and how do we address that? And then master one cloud first. There's this multi-cloud strategy myth that I think as organizations first look at onboarding public cloud or public cloud platform, I think there's this want or this need or this drive to embrace multi-cloud or multiple cloud platforms. And we're not saying that's a bad idea, but as you're kind of new to the public cloud enablement as an organization, we definitely feel that it's probably better to get good at one cloud or master one cloud first. Lastly, we'll go through questions. So I will address all Q&A towards the end of the presentation. Feel free to use the question widget to submit your questions, and we'll be sure to address those all at the end. So jumping into digital transformation. So earlier this year, Gartner published an article around digital transformation in healthcare written by a senior VP analyst named Mike Jones. And he says this: by 2020, 40% of healthcare providers will realize that the EHR technology or EMR technology cannot fully support their care delivery needs. And from my perspective, this is actually a powerful statement. This isn't a 5 to 10 year projection or prediction. He's saying by next year, 40% of healthcare systems will realize that their EMR doesn't meet their needs. And from my perspective, there's some truth there, right? We're seeing a lot of healthcare systems onboard new capabilities to kind of drive that digital business. So what Mike Jones does say is to embrace a true digital business, specifically within healthcare, there's kind of two paths that you need to traverse. One path is the healthcare business management, right? So those are non-clinical activities, removal of waste, real-time orchestration of healthcare resources, essentially managing your business. So you need to onboard new applications and capabilities to help run your business better or cleaner. And then there's the care delivery side, right? So there's going to be new capabilities that you're embracing that help diagnosis, treatment, and patient outcomes that eventually will kind of drive you towards increasing the patient experience. So ultimately what he's saying is that path to true digital business is not going to be kind of this straight line from left to top right if you're looking at the chart on my screen here. But what he is saying is that from each healthcare system is going to kind of have a unique path, because you're essentially changing the value prop to your patients. And as you change that value prop internally to your patients, there's going to be a ripple effect, or some ripples will be foreseen and some will be unforeseen. So the idea is that each path is going to be somewhat unique, but you do kind of need to traverse both as you're trying to improve that patient experience. But what we do know is that these new capabilities are driving a new digital platform. So as we try to onboard new capabilities, specifically around the experience platform, the ecosystem platform, data and analytics, which is embracing AI and ML, the IoT platform around medical devices, and the information system platform specifically around clinicians and staff, it's driving these new capabilities that are specifically being offered by public cloud providers. So a lot of what we see is a lot of business units are coming to healthcare IT saying we need this capability in AWS or we need this capability in GCP. And this is driving a new platform for consumption. So what does that mean? So it's never been, as we look at use cases specifically in public cloud, it was never realistic for most healthcare systems to kind of do your classic lift and shift and shutting down data centers. We're not seeing that. That's not necessarily the trend we're seeing. What we're seeing is these hyper-focused use cases that are driving new capabilities and new services, cloud-native services in the public cloud. So I kind of break them down in these three categories. First is business intelligence and analytics. Denials management, so claims and denials, understanding where your insurance denials are happening because it affects your revenue flow, population cost prediction, fraud, waste, and abuse, and prescription cost variance. So a lot of this is on these, for example, on the business management side, how to streamline your business and just run a cleaner, better business to ultimately improve patient experience and obviously reduce in waste. In the middle there is research, and we're seeing a lot of research-based institutions embrace some of the machine learning and AI capabilities in the public cloud. Some of the use cases that we've seen out there is genomic sequencing, cancer research, and molecular biology. Now I'd say for a lot of research-based healthcare systems, this is probably going to be your number one driver for public cloud. And then lastly is operational efficiency. So on the same note of using that machine learning and AI, we've seen a lot of healthcare systems embrace kind of the predictive analytics capabilities in public cloud, specifically around census forecasting, patient bed scheduling, and ambulatory scheduling. So on the note of predictive analytics, one of the partners that we work with today is Kensai. And they take a lot of the data that a lot of healthcare systems generate today. They dump it into Azure Blob Storage, and they run some of the predictive analytics capabilities in Azure to understand where, for example, they may see same-day surgery cancellation prediction, or short-stay prediction, or ICU readmission prediction. The idea that it's driving a lot of predictive analytics capabilities with some of the data that most healthcare systems are running today. And ultimately what that means is running a more efficient, streamlined business, as well as improving the patient experience by kind of streamlining the patient flow and understanding where some of the hurdles or the bottlenecks may be. And then applied AI. So a lot of times is we're seeing a lot of healthcare systems today embrace some of the applied AI capabilities within public cloud. So we talked about, for example, prescription cost variances. We talked about population cost prediction, specifically denials and denials management, understanding where your claims and denials for the insurance companies are happening, and then length of stay prediction. So a lot of these predictive analytics, or even you say advanced analysis, is some of the stuff that healthcare systems are embracing today. And then research. So when we talked about the research, one use case we're seeing specifically around genomic sequencing is leveraging these cloud-native applications. In this case, it's Illumina. One healthcare system we work with today is onboarding Illumina to do clinical genomic sequencing. So the idea that they can reduce genomic sequencing or laboratory results and reduce it from 48 hours to a matter of 30 minutes while the patient's still in a clinical setting. All right, so lesson learned number one, security. Managing PHI and HIPAA compliance in the cloud. So for a lot of healthcare systems that we work with, I'll say this is probably going to be the number one topic that we need to address before we can fully start building in the cloud. And I would say, kind of jumping right into it, the biggest misconception or the biggest clarification that we see is making sure that customers understand the shared responsibility model, right? So there's a shared responsibility model with each public cloud provider. In this case, this is Azure, but it still holds true with AWS and GCP, is that the underlying platform, so physical security and the platform security is still, for example, maintained by the public cloud provider, but there are still going to be components, there's still a line of delineation that is still going to be the consumer's responsibility. So, for example, the data that's being stored in the public cloud, the OS and network configurations, the client-side encryption, the network traffic encryption, all of this still needs to be protected, just like you would protect the data in your own data center. And then ultimately just eliminating the confusion around HIPAA compliance. So I think there's a lot of confusion around, well, if I use a HIPAA eligible service, then technically I'm HIPAA compliant, and that's not necessarily true. So in this example, we actually got a copy of the BAA being signed, so the business agreement being assigned with one of our healthcare clients. And if you look at that first red line where it says use only HIPAA eligible services to create, receive, and maintain and transmit PHI. Well, on the very next line, it says implement appropriate privacy security safeguards in order to protect PHI. So a lot of you guys who might wear that security hat, a lot of you CISOs in the room may quickly jump to notice that they're essentially putting the onus back on you. So just because a service is HIPAA compliant, it still doesn't mean that you are going to be HIPAA compliant. You still need to take the proper precautions to protect your data and put in the proper governance and controls to protect that data. So how do we approach this? So one of the things that we do is the Center of Internet Security, which is formerly the SANS Institute, publishes the CIS 20 benchmarks and is actually a set of critical controls, so actionable controls that allow us to actually go into every public cloud provider and actually just start practicing good security hygiene. So from our perspective, a lot of the guidelines that you might see out there are somewhat vague, but allowing us to actually put actionable controls in each public cloud platform allows us to kind of start tweaking your environment to actually put the proper security protections in place. And the biggest thing we say is just understanding that most cloud providers are a tool. So just because you have a tool doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be compliant. You still have to use the tool properly. So understanding how to use that tool and how to put the proper security controls in place is still very just as important as using HIPAA eligible services. Then if you take, for example, the HIPAA compliance portion of it, so HIPAA section 164, then it gives you a set of guidelines. The problem with a lot of the guidelines that you see within section 164 is they're somewhat vague, right? So they like to tell you what to do, but they don't exactly tell you how to do it. For example, one of my coworkers likes to say this, that a lot of the HIPAA guidelines it's like going to the doctor. They tell you to lose 20 pounds, but they don't exactly tell you how to do it. So you say, okay, well, I'm going to start running. And they say, no, that's bad for your knees. And they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to start fasting. Like, no, that's not good for you either. So it's kind of like looking into the vague guideline without actually telling you how to do it. So what we like to do is we take these guidelines and we align them to what the CIS controls actually say to do. So from our perspectives, this gives you actionable controls that you then can take to your security team to show them that you're being compliant. But then keep in mind, that's only a point-in-time snapshot. So we also say that you need some sort of advanced tooling, some sort of third-party tooling to give you real-time analysis as well as compliance checks, for example, as users are consuming the public cloud. As things are being built, for example, if there's an S3 bucket that's out to the public internet, the hope is you have the proper governance in place to stop that from happening. But if it does happen, I want to know about it immediately. So there still is the idea that even though you're going to look at the actionable controls, you still need some sort of real-time tooling to make sure that you can see what's going on in your public cloud environment or environments at any time. Lesson learned number 2, bridging that skills gap. So we talked about this earlier in the presentation, the idea that not just the healthcare vertical alone, but multiple verticals are seeing a gap in skills specifically around cloud and DevOps. So Gartner published a study just recently saying that by 2020, 75% of enterprises will experience visible business disruption due to infrastructure and operations skills gaps. And that's specifically due to IoT, hybrid IT infrastructure, cloud migrations, and DevOps requirements. There's no misstating the facts that it's very, very hard to hire this top-tier talent in the marketplace today. So there has to be some other way to embrace these new skills internally. So what we've done with a lot of the healthcare systems that we've worked with is focusing specifically on leveraging their existing skill sets today and allowing people to ramp up on these new skill sets. So there's a common term out there for the past few years that was essentially the cloud center of excellence. We like to take a little spin on it and call it the cloud community of excellence. And there's a reason behind that. Is a lot of cloud center of excellences that were formed previously kind of created a world of haves and have-nots, right? So here you have a group of excellent people over here and then everyone else. When you look at it from a community perspective, it's inviting people to want to contribute to the community. And ultimately what we say is you need to form some sort of tiger team. And you need to have a tiger team that includes your core infrastructure and your security guys. So a lot of the operational people that you have today. And then also incorporate some of the applications and DevOps teams, so the actual business units that are driving these new capabilities, as well as your cloud infrastructure and your cloud administrator engineering. We want them hyper-focused on the applications that you're onboarding, as well as the alignment expectations between all the silo groups, and then ultimately focused on ensuring security, performance, availability, cost controls, and governance. When we look at this tiger team, this is ultimately what we want them to focus on, is governance, right? So prioritizing services and evangelizing cloud services to the respective teams. We want them to plan, so standardize infrastructure configurations, standardizing infrastructure as code, standardizing provisioning processes. When we look at the build portion, we want them to help automate services, implement and maintain code, analyze code capacity management, develop OS configurations, and then run. Right, so the most important piece is this item down below right here, which is maintain operational uptime. I think this is the biggest misconception when people think about public cloud, is that I don't need an operations team to help maintain uptime. That's not true. There's still going to be deployment caveats and architectural caveats that require people to understand how this is deployed and how to maintain maximum uptime. Ultimately, as you build that tiger team, you start to want to scale it out, right? So scale it out based on the application that you're onboarding. So initially, if you start off with one application that's hyper-focused on genomic sequencing or IoT, you'd want to be able to scale it out based on the need for each application and grabbing people from different various groups based on the need. But one thing we don't want to happen is allowing vendors and partners to become your community of excellence. It needs to be organic, right? So you can leverage vendors and partners for knowledge, skills, and services, but you really, really want to see that organic growth internally. Otherwise, we don't see the community of excellence being successful internally, and you become too heavily dependent on a partner or a vendor. But then you do want a clear delineation of who's doing what, right? So you have your initial tiger team that you set up. They're going to help evangelize the services, drive POCs, drive training and sharing. But then you also want an architecture review board to help onboard new services, look at roadmaps, evaluate new services. But then the biggest gap we see for a lot of organizations is this one in the middle, a cost optimization and security. So we want a group of people that meet, whether it's weekly or monthly, to review cost optimization. I think a lot of this sprawl is what hurts a lot of organizations internally. Not keeping costs under control or deploying too many resources or orphaned resources that essentially could be pulled back a little bit. So without this cost optimization board, this is where things can kind of get out of control. But it doesn't mean one person has to be limited to one side or the other. Maybe multiple roles can traverse both, but we do see these three separate functions. So the other thing we like to look at is developing training programs. So as you're going to scale your community of excellence, you want to make sure that the proper training is in place. For example, Cloud Academy. What it does is it sends a baseline skills assessment exam to each one individual. And organizationally, it sets up a set of reports and tells you where you are as a whole, as a group. And then as it customizes and tailors these training programs for each individual, it will send you, or you can pull real-time reporting to see where everyone's at. One use case they like to tout is Chase Bank, that created their own training program and created their own certification. And each individual had to be certified within Chase's custom certification program to start building on the cloud. It allows you to use a combination of canned training videos for AWS, GCP, and Azure, but you can also incorporate your own training videos for all those elements that are custom to your own enterprise cloud. Lesson learned number 3, master one cloud first. Concentrate first on getting one cloud provider right. A lot of organizations we work with want to lead with this multi-cloud strategy, especially hot out the gates. And I would say a lot of the risks or a lot of the benefits don't outweigh the risks. We already talked about the impact of skills and training. There's already an industry gap there, and the trend we've seen is a lot of engineers are usually really good at one platform or the other. So now you're trying to hire for multiple platforms or hire for skills for multiple platforms. And if not, then you're trying to train your operations folks to not understand the on-prem infrastructure, but also understand the design caveats for 2 public clouds. And then operationalizing multiple clouds. I'd say get really good at operationalizing a single cloud first, understand all the design caveats as it compares to your on-prem infrastructure, and then once you get really good at that, then start to look at onboarding the second public cloud provider. When we talk about that public cloud operating model and what it takes to operationalize a public cloud, it's anything that comes from education to governance. So the education and training plans that we talked about, account structure, common services and where they're going to live, network connectivity, whether it's VPN or some sort of direct connectivity, storage, backups, identity access management, security, monitoring, cost controls. All of this needs to be taken into account when we're looking at operationalizing a public cloud. So it's easy to say that we're going to have a multi-cloud strategy, but as we actually look to put those operational components into play, there's going to be caveats between all the different public cloud providers, and this is where the complexity comes in play. So taking the public cloud operating model and scaling up from there should look something like this. What AHEAD has built is a reference architecture called the Digital Delivery Platform. It incorporates everything from scaled DevOps, intelligent operations, and enterprise cloud. So the same components you see on-prem as well as the components you see in the public cloud. And then weaving in automation and security is imperative. Ultimately, what we want to see is the ability to service some of these new business initiatives. So the same types of use cases from predictive analytics and IoT, the same type of use cases we saw in the beginning of the presentation, we want to be able to service these business units appropriately. The end state should look something like this. We build an enterprise-ready cloud platform, and we now can onboard new applications and business initiatives as needed. When you look at building a digital delivery platform like this, I think this is probably a topic of conversation we could spend another 2 to 3 hours on. It's probably out of scope of this webinar, but the idea is if you have any interest in talking more, reach out to your account team and schedule some time at the AHEAD Briefing Center. All right, everyone, that concludes my presentation. I want to thank everyone for listening in. Now would probably be a good time to segue into the Q&A session. If you haven't already, please feel free to submit any questions you may have into the Q&A widget, and we will review accordingly.